True to what you said on paper.
Well, good good morning and welcome back to At the Round Table with MAMLEO. And we want to thank our sponsor, The Money Store, for all your mortgage needs. Give branch manager Cora Holbrook a call at area code 508-345-4726. Again, that's 508-345-4726. Again, you're listening to At the Round Table with MAMLEO. We're in studio. My brother from another, the Rhodes Scholar is here. Good morning, Brother Rhodes.
How Good morning.
Good
How
morning.
Are you, Brother Ellison?
Dr. Bradley is off today. He's a little under the weather. As he texted us and said, normally he gives you a checkup from the neck up. He said he needs a checkup from the neck down. He had a little case of food poisoning last night, so he's not with us today physically, but he is in spirit, and Pastor Hobbs is over there doing a great job engineering. And if you want to join in the conversation this morning, give us a call at 617 282-0685 617-282-0685. And we are happy to have our guest in studio, my friend Ed Flynn, who is the District 2 City Councilor, the former president of the council, wearing his proud Navy. And I know Navy and Army are going to be playing today, and he is representing Navy proudly there. So we know which side he's on. He's a veteran, so thank you also for your service to this country. But he currently serves as a city councilor representing District 2. A lot going on down there in the council. First, I want to say good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Larry. It's good to be with you and your wonderful team here. And I always enjoy coming over here, and even if it's 2 or 3 times a year, it's an honor to be here and to listen and talk to you. But also, I love listening and taking questions from the audience too. So it's good to be with you guys.
Well, we appreciate that. But also, let me say, folks, you're one of the few that will reach out to us and say, "Hey, I haven't been on. You mind if we come on?" So I appreciate that, because sometimes we get caught up, in the fact that you want people to hear from you and what you're doing in the council and all that. So that means a lot, because we don't get many calls like that from people. We have to call them and try to track them down. So the fact that you're willing to do that, we appreciate that. Again, it is good having you here. So we're going to dive right into it. A lot going on in the council there. Recently with the city councilor for District 7, Tanya Fernandez Anderson, being indicted and being arrested there. I know the hearing that took place recently was the last hearing of the year for the city council, but that has to be a distraction, I'm sure, for the work getting done there, because I just saw the clippings of the news the other day. It looked like it was a larger than normal turnout at the council, but sadly it wasn't for the business to take place. It was for the reason of her arrest. How's that faring down there at the city hall?
It is a major distraction. As you mentioned, the last week was the last meeting we had was recent, and there was a large audience there, and it was actually a 5-hour meeting. Usually they're 2 hours or 3 hours. A lot of media, but the arrest of my colleague is a major distraction. It will impact certainly her district, but it will impact the city of Boston as well. And when city councilors say that it will have no impact on the business of the city councilors, on the city council, is inaccurate. It does have an impact. It has a negative impact. But on the other hand, and I did call for Councilor Fernandez Anderson to resign for various reasons. I also believe that she should be entitled to a fair and respect before the law in the federal courthouse as well.
Right. So there are a lot of people, I talk to, particularly in the black community, who say, we have going into a president-elect who is a convicted felon, who has been convicted of a crime. She has been charged. And that the outrage doesn't seem to be as much for him, who's going to lead the country, as it is for a city council. And let me be perfectly clear, if folks are listening. I'm all about the rule of law. I don't think that's where, but it seems to be, it's gotten a lot more murky, where things that we used to hold high and hold people accountable for, particularly political folks who are tasked with holding other folks accountable, passing laws, passing ordinances, taxing people, and if I, as a former city employee, as a police officer, just wasn't allowed to take any type of gratuity from the public in any way, even though it wasn't a bribe. That's just forbidden. There seems to be a different set of rules, and I guess there was some conversation, but that there is no ethics. And I know the last time you were here, you were we talked about the fact that there was very little training or guidance that when you are elected, and it was shocking to me that didn't take place. And has that improved, and where is it on this ethics information, or this ethics proposal, that there is some ethics and accountability? And the other thing that folks are talking about as well is that if I was a current employee for the city of Boston, and once I was indicted, I would stop being paid. But as an elected official who is receiving tax dollars as their salary, they continue to be paid. To me, is the double standard I don't understand.
Yeah, the ethics committee, I propose that, and it won't be taken up really until next year. But the bigger question I think you focused on, Larry, is, before this, there should be almost a training program for city councilors when they get elected, before they get sworn in, even when they're campaigning. But give them the rules of the road, tell them and educate them about some of the challenges, some of the difficulties there are in campaigning and reporting requirements. And we don't really do that as a city, as a body. And we're doing a disservice to incumbent elected officials, but also people that want to run for office, because the first thing you do is open up a campaign account and start raising money. And you have to do it by law, and if you make one minor misstep, it could cost you the campaign, and even if you win, it could stay with you for the rest of your political career. It'll negatively impact you. But I think there has to be training, as you have highlighted, for elected officials while they're incumbents, and even if they're considering and taking the steps necessary to run for office.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, there is little, if any, oversight on city councilors once they're elected. They're kind of an independent body, and the council itself doesn't really, because they're elected other than by their constituents when it comes up to re-election, that inside there's really very little internal mechanisms to deal with this type of behavior. If it comes up, the person can still continue to serve in their capacity. There's nothing, because I know last time there was, when City Councilor Chuck Turner was removed, and the court said there was a process that was not done correctly. And you would think that would have been addressed and somehow put some rules in there that governs how folks operate in the council.
Yeah, and that is what you described is accurate. There are no rules. The precedent really is the city councilor Chuck Turner. In my opinion, it's probably not. I don't agree with it. But the precedent is that if an elected official is arrested and convicted, the person still can't be really removed at that point. It almost has to be at the sentencing part. So the period between the conviction and the sentencing, the elected official is still a member of the body. That's what the federal judge ruled. So even that could take several months, but there are no rules per se as it relates to elected officials, and maybe me proposing that ethics committee is a first step.
But council, it seems to me a simple fix that even though the city councilors are elected by the citizens of the city of Boston, that why aren't they governed under the same rules as any other employee? Because technically we're all employees who work for the city. We're paid by taxpayers. To just impose what is in place already for the firefighter, the teacher, the custodian, the librarian. If they're in the same situation arises for them, why not just adopt the same policy for our elected officials as we do for those who they oversee.
Basically, so the elected official would not be still on the payroll. In I think it probably has to do with the elected official being elected by the community and still having an obligation to fulfill his or her duties. And you don't want to necessarily leave the constituents without an elected leader that they already put in place for a period of 2 years. I think that's some of it, but that's not the complete answer. I think the complete answer is what is the long-term plan dealing with that type of scenario going forward.
It seems to be that third rail that no one wants to touch.
No, I agree with that. I don't think anyone wants to touch it. And maybe this ethics committee, we will discuss it. Maybe we won't. But I do think it's worthy of a conversation. I think it's worthy of listening to constituents and experts in that field.
Yeah.
And it has to be more than the ethics training that we get periodically from the state ethics committee. I think we get it twice a year. But it needs to be more than that.
Yeah. And what is this, before we grab this call, what is this current salary? Because it's gone up considerably. What's the current salary? Because part of it they were saying was that she was behind financially. I don't know what her financial situation is, but what's the current salary of a city councilor?
The current salary is $115 a year, starting January 1st of next year, in a couple of weeks. It will be $120, and then a year from then it'll be $125.
Right. So that's. I mean, when you look at most salaries for city employees, even for firefighters and police, that's not a starting salary for most people who are putting in long hours. There's opportunities for certain folks who work for the city, fires, police, overtime and details. But I remember, when the salary was around $75,000. So we're talking, and that was when City Council Yancey. So there's been a considerable increase, and they seem to be built-in increases. So it's not like you're starving in those positions. You're not getting rich, and not saying you should, but I think people should be paid a wage, a living wage, and $125,000, $120,000. That's not a bad salary for a city councilor.
No, it's a good salary. We voted on it. It was controversial at the time. I actually voted against the salary increase. A lot of my colleagues wanted to go higher than 125.
Oh. Wow.
And they didn't necessarily want those steps taken. They wanted a higher salary almost
away.
Immediately. I don't want to criticize them. I'm not going to name anyone, but they wanted something very high, much higher than 125. And we settled, and the mayor settled on the 125 salary. But if you do the job right, it's a 7-day job, 14, 15 hours a day. Some councilors work hard at it, some don't.
Right.
Some I haven't seen in months in City Hall.
Yeah.
Some just come in on Wednesdays.
Well, that's why I said it's like I used to call it the cameo session,
Right.
And then they come in acting like their pants are on fire, and then the first ones to leave. They come in late and they leave early.
Yeah, right. It's about being accessible and being in the community and being accessible to the media as well, in answering tough questions and being held accountable.
Yeah. Speaking of which, we're going to open up the lines. Good morning, caller. Welcome to the roundtable, and guest City Councilor from District 2, Ed Flynn.
Good morning. This is the voice of reason, Jamal Crawford.
All right. Good morning.
Good morning, Jamal.
So first of all, Councilor Flynn, I am so surprised that you just brought up attendance and would disparage your fellow councilor, Mr. Fitzgerald, in such a manner. Are you telling me Fitz is not showing up?
I didn't mention any colleague by name. I do know John is a dedicated and professional city councilor, but I'm not going to highlight anyone's attendance record. But John is doing an excellent job, in my opinion. But I do think, Jamal, that we have to improve the attendance record of city councils, not just at the Wednesday meeting, but hearings throughout the week. Many times the attendance is 30% or 40%, and that's discouraging.
Right. And I would imagine, depending on the level of interest on a particular issue or the subject matter that's before it, or if it's committee or what have you, I would get it. And this is what I want to say. as you may know, and I don't know all the listening on this, but I used to work in city council back in 1997. Gee whiz. And then, of course, I ran for office. So I want to offer this perspective. One, whatever you do with this ethics committee, which I actually believe in, I believe is long overdue, and I believe that shouldn't be controversial at all. I think ethics committees, transparency committees, measures for accountability are always good everywhere. One agency I want to highlight, though, is when I was running for office, and, I had a write-in campaign. I didn't even have a manager that, I didn't know what I was doing. And the office, the OCPF, which is the Office of Campaign and Political Finance, if every state agency could run like this. These people were so friendly, so accommodating, walk you through everything, excused your ignorance, there were no dumb questions. And so I was walked through every aspect of it. And if you make a mistake, which I did a couple of times, hey, we didn't get a last month's report for check number 121. We didn't, and then, you just, I'm sorry, and you correct it and you move on. So there are some things that are working well, and I think we need to, adapt off of those models. So whatever you do in the ethics committee, I think you should include the OCPF in some of those discussions.
But so now, Jamal, let me jump in what you said, because this is when I proposed to the council a minute ago, is that it seems like a simple fix in just applying what is already in place for all the other 16,000 plus employees of the city of Boston are governed under a code of conduct, ethics, on what they can and cannot do, what they can and cannot accept as employees. It's clear and it's enforced when you get caught doing something that you're not supposed to be doing. And I think if you just applied those basic standards to the city council, would be a great start.
I mean, absolutely. But also, too, to some of my former points, the saying, it ain't no fun when the rabbit got the gun?
Yes.
So
I never heard that one.
Ask Elmer
Fudd. So I think now, though, too, there is a level of outrage that I'm seeing in Boston, and once again, me being an old school guy, even back to when your father was the mayor, right? And watching the evolution of the Boston Herald and the Boston Globe, which the more things change, the more they stay the same. If you read some of the comments, I mean, the Herald had to shut off the comments. You know what I mean? It was bare knuckles out there. Right? But I think that with some of the changes that have taken place, I notice a level of outrage that is different now that it is women and people of color who are in the limelight. So, for instance, let me take two targets, obviously Councilor Tanya Fernandez-Anderson and Councilor Julia Mejia. So because both of those are outspoken women of color, I would dare suggest that they get a higher level of scrutiny and public, pushback than, let's say, some people of old, a la the Jim Kellys, the Dapper O'Neills, the Louise Day Hicks. These type of political figures who were saying crazy things in their times. And I mean, I could go more recent, but I'll just use those. Well,
let me just jump in, Jamal.
The outrage is not the same.
Right, let me just jump in, because recently I read an article where you and Councilor Murphy were having some issues with some of the councilors there. So there seems to be some internal issues that even before this flared up that are going on in the council. Is it that much of a, one side of the aisle? I guess, is it ideas, or is it based on other issues or other things that people are reading into it, that this may be a racial issue because there's two white city councilors who are saying that they're now being treated differently, and the majority of the city council now are people of color? Is there any truth to that, or is it what's going on now?
Yeah, it's an issue based on political ideas. In the way the city is moving, what direction the city is moving. And I do recall a recent article about that, where I was quoted in it. In looking back at it, Larry, I wish I didn't get involved in that article. I do try to speak out and take questions from the media and state what I actually believe in. But sometimes when you do that, you do cause controversy unnecessarily. At that point, I wish I didn't get involved in highlighting those issues, but I did. But there's a divide in the city council, certainly, very far progressive elected officials, and also more moderate elected officials. I would probably describe myself as more moderate. And, certainly there's more progressive elected officials in the city, and they certainly have the ability to make the major changes because the majority of the city council, probably at least 10 people there are very progressive. So I think it's based on political ideology.
All right. Jamal, stand by. I want to bring the other caller into the conversation. Good morning, caller. Welcome to the round table.
Good morning. I have some questions for the city councilor.
Okay.
Yeah, my first question is, when is the city council, along with the mayor, is going to cooperate, not compromise, because cooperation and compromise are two completely different things, in making Boston go forward for the future? That's my first question.
With its what?
When will the city councilors and the mayor would cooperate, not compromise, because there are two completely different things in moving the city of Boston forward in terms of the future, making sure that people like I can stay in the city? That's my first question. My second question is, when will you, as a city councilor, along with, if not the city council in general, is going to give T. Michael the resources that this man needs to get his People's Academy up and running, to help black and brown people and returning citizens in getting into the middle class?
Well, thank you, caller, for those two questions. And your first question is, when will the city elected officials and the mayor cooperate and work together, not compromise, but cooperate? I think you do see that on several issues, and I think there's a lot more work that we need to do in building and working together. But I think your question is fair. We have to cooperate and work together, certainly on improving public schools, public education in Boston, in addressing quality of life issues, neighborhood services.
So let's stop for a second. What is the budget for the city council? What was the budget that was voted on in July? So the operating budget for the city of Boston is how much now?
I believe it's close to 4 million.
4 billion?
4 billion, yeah, 4 billion, yeah.
I thought it was larger than that.
Yeah.
So, but in a third of that, if not more, almost is the schools.
Yes.
Right?
It's the school, yeah.
$1.4 billion. And how do we continue, as you said with schools, how do we continue to operate a budget of that magnitude with very little, if any, improvements? Right, we're throwing money, like what company would be allowed to spend that kind of money and then every year come in looking for more money and show no improvements on what we've already had let them spend?
And
Don't forget police overtime, Larry.
No, right. No, I'm saying that I'm going to get to that, but I'm talking about the school budget. There's nowhere near, no other budget is anywhere near, and we have a decline in the population of students in the schools as well.
Right, and I believe we spend $170 million on transportation in the Boston Public Schools, and I believe next year we'll end up spending maybe 175 million on transportation at BPS.
Almost cheaper to buy everyone a car.
Yeah, and the transportation system is a failure. We came out with a new app that doesn't work,
Right.
and more students are being picked up late for school, dropped off home, sometimes 6-7 o'clock at night. Little kids, they're missing school, and many of the students. What really gets me angry is children that are with special needs, that need to get into their class at the first few minutes, but they're missing 2 periods, and that might be physical therapy, that might be some type of occupational therapy support or reading. And those children deserve those types of services, and they're not getting them. And that's something I've been focused on for a long period of time. But ensuring students with disabilities especially have equal access.
So, Council, where do you stand? Because the citizens of Boston voted, and I think this goes to why they voted to have an elected school committee, right? I don't know where you stand on that aisle, because I think there seems to be no independence of the body that at the school committee. They are just operatives, in my opinion, for the mayor, because they're appointed by the mayor. So that, if the city council is going to be held accountable, but we put people in there who are operating a $1.4 billion budget, but they're not accountable to anyone except the mayor, when Boston is the only schools district that doesn't have an elected school body and seems to be doing the worst or close to the worst from our school committee perspective, because they don't have to worry about being elected. Some people say, well, that's a good idea. It hasn't proven that it's a good idea. I don't know where you stand on elected or appointed school committees, but
At one point, I was for an elected school committee in over a period of time. And I'm not here to criticize the current school committee, but I do think there has to be some accountability to the residents of the city. And that accountability would be an elected school committee. And I don't know if you need a body similar to the city council where you have 4 at large in nine district. Maybe you just have four at large, no district. But you do need some representation from the people of Boston.
Yeah.
And the only way you can get that really is an elected school committee.
Yeah.
And right now, the current school committee basically answers to the mayor. So there really isn't any accountability to the
right,
residents.
they only have to keep one person happy. And as Jamal alluded to, he was talking about the police overtime budget. And a lot of people, and I'm not defending it, but a lot of people don't understand is that we have not kept pace with the number of retirees. And when I came on the job, the police department had around 2,200 officers. They usually hover somewhere around 1,800, well, less than 2,000. So we're asking people to do more with less, and that's where a lot of this overtime is the minimum mandatory requirements for public safety. This isn't just hiring extra bodies. This is just maintaining the basic minimum number of officers on the street every day.
Well, that's correct, Larry, and you did a tremendous job as a police officer for so many years. The real problem, and the public highlights this issue, is the overtime budget for the Boston Police. But the public really needs to understand that we are short several hundred police officers, and every year they're retiring. Many police officers leave to go to the Boston Fire Department or to cities and towns throughout Greater Boston. Boston police officers consistently work 16 hours a day. Sometimes 5 days a week, and they don't have any type of family or commitment to outside of their job.
Yeah.
So it's impacting them. It's impacting their health, their physical health, their mental health. It's a system that's not working. We need to hire, in my opinion, 300 police officers for the next 10 years every year. And then we'll see the overtime budget go down, in my opinion. I don't think these police officers want to work 16 hours consistently for 5 days a week.
I can tell you, when I came on, it was very rare to get overtime
Right.
as a police officer, unless there was a summertime, vacation time, filling. But this, where it's almost built in every day, and it's really a real reason why a lot of us are leaving early, because we come in, we're prisoners. Literally, no pun intended. When you come in, you don't know if you're going to go home because we're short-staffed, so that those positions have to be filled. Like yesterday, I was glad to hear, this week, I should say, they promoted 15 new detectives. Well, that comes from the bottom. That means that's 15 patrol spots that now have to be filled from somewhere, and it takes 6 months to get a recruit class through the academy. They're just not bringing the numbers through. People see who comes through the front door. They don't see who goes out the back. We probably have just as many, if not more, who retire at the same time that we're putting a class
That's
through.
right. Know what I think of when I hear of these arguments, Larry, is when I was in the military, I served 24 years. Sometimes when I'd be on a ship, I'd work 24 straight hours, and it's very unhealthy. After 12 hours, after 13 hours, you're practically sleeping while you're doing your job. And after 16 hours, you're not on top of your game, and you're making mistakes. And so here we are, we're putting police officers, men and women, with a weapon in very difficult situations across the city after working 14 hours, 15 hours, and we expect them to be on top of their game 100% of the time. And if they make a mistake, elected officials are going to come down hard on them.
Right. And also the impact on their home life.
That's right.
I know for me, my family is the most important thing. And this was a job, and I treated it like a job in the respect that it wasn't a priority over my family. And it became where it was intrusive in my family, and I had to decide that I needed to move on past it. And sadly, because people like myself could have stayed, and we're not passing that down to some of the younger officers, because we need to get out for our own sanity, our mental health. But it doesn't seem to be a sense of urgency on the mayor's behalf, because the mayor is the one who decides when these classes and how this is going to move along, to put the numbers in, or to find a facility that can bring through a class large enough to offset this, because the academy they have currently, they just don't have the infrastructure there to put these numbers through that we need. Dick, could you have anything else that you wanted to, before we let you go, to Counselor?
Yeah, they have two more questions.
Yeah.
I'm a strong believer in 2-term limits for all politicians, because we've seen many times before that a lot of politicians, when they stay in office, they feel like an retirement. Is the counselor, and again, he could disagree with this, he agree to disagree with me on term limits. Should there be a 2-term limit for all politicians, from the city councilors all the way up to the governor?
Well, it's a good question. I would support term limits. Let me start with elected officials in Boston. I think the mayor of Boston should serve 2 terms, which would be a total of 8 years. And I think city councilors should be able to serve 4 terms,
Well, I think they should change,
which is 8 years.
I think they should change that every 2 years. I think there should be a 4-year. I think it should run concurrent. I think because you get in there, you have to start running for re-election almost immediately. So I think that there should be 4-year blocks, 2 4-year terms if you're going to do it that way. I don't think this every 2 years is just ridiculous.
Yeah, it is a lot. Once you get elected, you almost have to turn around and start campaigning again. Because we're almost on the ballot every other year and we're campaigning all the time, many of your decisions, including myself, they're based on politics. And it shouldn't be based on politics. It should be based on what's in the best interest of the residents. And elected officials are impacted by the next election, including myself, and that should not be the case.
Yeah. So I want to pivot a little bit, because I want to make sure we leave enough time for this mayoral race, because there's rumors that you may throw your hat in the ring. We want to give you time to address that, if that's true or not. But housing in Boston, you live in an area in South Boston area where it has historically been expensive to live, and it's probably even more so now. But that is now caught up with the rest of the city, in that there is very little that is helping people. The average price of a home in Boston is like almost $1 million. And from what I'm hearing, there was a vote in that there's going to be an increase in property taxes for next year on. So when you're starting to reassess these property values, those numbers, Boston still has probably, I live outside the city, has some of the lowest taxes on real estate, but it's still significant to people who are barely making it now. And I think they voted on, was an 8% increase or somewhere in that neighborhood. But that's significant to people here in the city of Boston, particularly when houses are being priced at $1 million starting. How's the council addressing that, as well as they're saying now there's a budget deficit when all this COVID money that's been, what happened?
Those are great questions, and let me start. What my wife and I got married 24 years ago, and we bought a house together in South Boston for $200,000. Now it's probably worth, I don't know, 800, 600. I don't really know.
I think you're lowballing. But
I'll buy it from you.
But know what happened when we bought our house 25 years ago? It was long-time residents there. It was a lot of seniors. It was a lot of city workers, a lot of working-class families. A lot of them have moved out. Almost all of them have moved out. And what you've seen is a lot of young professionals that have moved in. And my wife and I are practically the oldest people on our block. But you don't have the same families that have been there, that have built the community. Nothing against the young people. They're nice people. They're doing the best they can. But there should be a place for longtime residents in these traditional neighborhoods, South Boston, Roxbury, Charlestown, East Boston, Mattapan. They helped build the city. They were here during difficult times in the 60s and 70s, and they contributed a lot. There should be a place for them in the city.
But that's also making it difficult because a lot of the city jobs require you to live in the city, the residency, right?
Yeah.
And if you're starting at $1 million, and I'm a librarian, or I work in the schools in a capacity that says I mandates I live in the city. I saw a year or so ago there were positions that they couldn't fill because the pay scale did not allow these people to live in the city, and they kind of tried to carve out an exemption. That's pretty much any city worker now.
And that's exactly right. And I don't believe in the residency law. At one point, it had its merits when Boston was struggling financially, but now if you work for the Parks Department, you get yourself a job for 50 grand, 60 grand. You can't afford to buy a home. You can't afford to rent a home unless you have some roommates with you. And who really wants to live with a bunch of roommates when you're a grown person?
Right.
In my opinion, nothing against anyone that does that. But on the other hand, well, let me give you an example, Larry. Too, the Boston Police Crime Lab. We were having a difficult time bringing in DNA analyst, crime analyst at the crime lab, because a lot of the jobs, they were good paying jobs, they were $80,000 or $90,000, but the people that had these advanced degrees would come to Boston making $90,000, and they couldn't afford to buy a house or rent an apartment.
Right.
And they passed on a lot of these jobs. And so there should be some carve-out for various reasons, but I think the whole issue of residency is long overdue for us to discuss it. I don't support it.
No, it's lived past its where you could find some place that was affordable. My biggest thing is if you take a job, you show up to work, no matter where you came from. As long as I found that I was actually more on time when I moved out of the city because I allowed myself more time than when I lived 5 minutes from the station. I was always running in like I was a firefighter rather than a police officer. So, my pants on fire. So, Dick, what was your final question for the council? Did we lose Dicko? Okay. So I'm gonna jump right in.
I got a couple of hits right quick, and then I could clear.
Go ahead.
Okay, so one, back to the subject of council pay. What I have long thought is whatever pay you guys decide at, right? What I do believe, though, is that there should be a differential between district councilor pay and at-large councilor pay. So let's say right now, district councilors get 115, then I think that an at-large should get like 125, because there's no way. I mean, at-large councilors, by definition, have the entire city to deal with, as opposed to folks who have a district. I think that's just a common sense approach. And then the second thing, and really the bigger issue, I was enraged when I saw the responses from the United States Postal Service to the city council. They thumbed their nose at you guys. We don't have to show up. There's no problems here, so on and so forth. And as I know you are aware, there was another investigation. It was just, I think, in the Globe the other day or whatever, at the South Boston Fort Point Postal Station, where major problems were revealed. Where all this time they've been saying, no problems here, no problems here. And I can tell you, sir, I have suffered from it. I have missed documents from the IRS. I have missed documents from child support. I have missed deadlines because I was getting mail up to a month later. You've heard Priscilla's stories and all that, but please comment on the United States Postal Service, please.
I agree with you on the U.S. Postal Service. I'm active with the Disabled American Veterans, and most veterans now get their medication over the mail. And when a veteran or anyone doesn't get their necessary medical prescription drugs or any type of other medical services or any other type of meal that they need, it is impacting them, it's impacting their family, it's impacting their health. We do have problems with the United States Postal Service, and it has been downsized significantly under the Trump administration, in my opinion. It plays a critical role, and we need a strong and healthy public postal service. And the men and women there that deliver the mail are doing a great job. I see them, sometimes they're working till 9 o'clock at night.
And on Sundays too these days.
Yeah, and on Sundays. And they're working very hard, and they're carrying this heavy bag around, and, you know, they need support, and I don't know if it's people not taking the jobs or what the reason is, but I do know the men and women that do these jobs work hard and take the job seriously. I think it's upper management that's really screwing things up. And let me just respond briefly about council pay, district council pay and at-large pay. It's a fair question, but as a district councilor, you're responsible, you're more of a hands-on, day-to-day management of everything and anything in your district. You don't duck any issues, you respond to everything. In my opinion, I know my at-large councilors won't like to hear this, but I think district councilors work harder than at-large city councilors, because a district councilor does not pass the buck if there's an issue in their district. An at-large person can always say, well, let's work together and let's get the district councilor involved. But district councilors have to be available, have to be accessible, and solve problems. That's their job, solving problems, constituent services, neighborhood services. If you don't like that part of the job, then you're in the wrong business.
All right, Jamal, thank you, Ditka. We're going to open up the lines. You listen to the Roundtable with MAMLEO. The calling number here, 617-282-0685, 617-282-0685. Council, we want to talk about, it hasn't gotten as much attention, so I don't know if things have improved. I know we had a huge issue with the immigration here, and I know Rhodes is a Haitian American. Yep. He's born here. It's impacted the schools. It's impacted the budget, financially. You know, folks are sleeping out at Logan Airport. Has that situation gotten any better? And I know that's had a big hit on the budget here in the city of Boston, because there's a cost associated with that.
Yeah, it had a major impact on housing here in the city, but also in the state as well. Boston has something called Massachusetts, I should say, has a program where anyone that comes to the state is eligible for housing, regardless of your ability to pay.
Right.
I know Governor Healy is dealing with that, and the expense that has caused the taxpayers of Boston is significant. And, you know, I think there still has to be a balance when people that need housing get housing, but at some point, in my opinion, we just can't.
We don't have the capacity.
We don't have the capacity, we don't have the money, and the only way you can get the money is raise taxes. And people are struggling. Working class families and people on fixed incomes are struggling. Boston is a very compassionate place, as is Massachusetts, but at some point we have to say we can't accept everybody in our city that wants housing. We just can't do it any longer.
No, there's a cost associated with that. That's a great answer. Good morning, caller. Welcome to the round table with City Councilor District 2, Ed Flynn.
Good morning. This is T. Michael Thomas from the People's Academy.
Good morning, T. Michael.
Good morning, T. Michael.
You're not going to think it's a good morning when I'm finished with my questions.
Okay, we're here. We get thick skin.
I have a few questions concerning the People's Academy. We have sent a letter, a deposition on crimes that was committed against T. Michael with evidence, things like that. It was ignored by the Toronto City Council and the mayor. Also, this program has been in existence, creating jobs and opportunity for the Commonwealth, for taxpayers, for voters. And this city and this mayor and this council refuse to support the program. Also, the mayor is given $1 billion a year. The guy is with like $4 billion over 100 million, 80 or 100 million dollars in Charlestown to do development. Also, folks in White Stadium, you have received, I'm sure, along with the other councilors, of my Search for Justice memo. I want to know, when is this council going to grow a spine and address the crimes that was committed against T. Michael and his program?
Well, I'm going to just jump in Council Flynn, because if you're saying crimes have been committed, I'm not sure if that's the proper venue for the council. I mean, if there's some other things that they can address, so that sounds like a law enforcement or the AG's office on that aspect, but I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to as far as what the crimes are, if it's something that the councilor can address.
Yeah, thank you, T. Michael, and I'm not familiar with the crimes that were possibly committed, but as Larry mentioned, that would be more of a law enforcement, attorney general, district attorney issue. But I think what you're also saying is, what is the status of providing funding to support your program on job training and helping young men, young women get into various trades so that they can have the skills to support their family. And I agree with you. I think the program that you have is helping a lot of young men and young women gain invaluable services, support in the building trades, and I think it should be expanded.
Thank you, Counselor, and I hope we can have a conversation in person soon.
I'll make sure that happens. One thing I know
This is
about
a great show, and I will be listening.
Council Flynn,
Thank
he
you.
doesn't duck things, and when we discussed it, he said everything was fair game this morning. He asked to come on to the broadcast. I consider him a friend of mine personally, also a friend of MAMLEO, and a big supporter of the issues that we have been pushing through. So, Councilor, there's an election next year. There's a mayor election and a city council election. And folks are wondering, where's Ed Flynn? Is he going to be running for mayor next year, or is he going to be running for city council? Have you decided, or are you still mulling? I know there was rumors out there, so we're not starting anything here, that you may be thinking. Have you decided, or are you still mulling over where you're going to run and why?
Fair question. I'm still considering my options, including possibly running for higher office or continuing to serve on the city council. I do love my job on the council. It's a challenging job. I like to provide the positive leadership I think that's lacking at times on the council, and I have a different perspective than many of my colleagues, especially on issues of economics and some public safety related issues. I want to continue to provide that positive leadership, not just to my constituents, but to the residents of Boston. Does that mean I'm going to run for higher office? Not necessarily, but I am weighing my options, and I want to continue to provide the leadership in this city, whether I'm running for mayor or for city council. But I love the city. I love the people. I want to be part of the solutions and be part of fixing challenges that I see in front of us.
Well, I know your track record, and part of it, your dad was in public service most of his life. You in the military, in the Navy, so you have a record of public service, and then being a city councilor. I'd be perfectly honest with you, and this is me speaking here. Mayor Wu ran on a lot of issues that she was a former member of the city council, the president, and also an at-large councilor. She ran on a lot of issues that she said that she had the solutions to fix, and mass and cast being one of them. And now we're seeing, as the Globe reported out last week, that the problem hasn't been fixed. It's just been dispersed. It's hitting your area down in Andrews Square.
Yep.
It's down in Nubian Square. It's in Grove Hall. If you go down there to Mass and Cass, if you're just walking through, if you're coming in, it's not very inviting for the public. You can barely walk on any of the sidewalks because it almost looks like a fortress down there.
Right.
The schools are no better shape than they are. Crime is down, but we go through those peaks and valleys with crime anyway, so it's very hard to have an indicator that somehow what we're doing is affecting that. But housing, as we talked, is gone. It's through the roof, and now we're going to be seeing a tax increase on the residents here. I'd have to give the mayor a failing grade. That's me, and I think there is time. Time is for a new mayor, whoever that is. So I'm not sure, and I don't know how you can work in the council because I see it's very dysfunctional. Just looking at it from the outside, I can only imagine what's taking place on the inside. So someone needs to run for mayor next year. If Mayor Wu, I know she has said, but I don't know if she's officially announced that she's running. But we do need a new mayor in the city of Boston.
Well, what I try to do on the council is I show up every day, 5 days a week, and I'm in there during the morning and the afternoon. Then I go to the meetings at nighttime into the community, listening to residents on the weekends, Saturday and Sunday. I'm in the district, I'm in the community. And the reason I do it is I love the city. And anytime I'm involved, anytime I'm working, I always believe that I have to give 100% of my time and effort into the job. Certainly, my wife and 2 children are very important as well to me. Our 2 children are in college, but I still believe I have something to offer, and that's positive leadership, and that's based on my experience serving in the U.S. Navy, serving as a probation officer at Suffolk Superior Court, being a resident, being a youth sports coach, having the ability to listen closely to residents, understand the city. But also, I'm not afraid of making difficult decisions. I'm not afraid to tackle controversial problems. I've done that my whole life. But it's about respecting each other, listening to each other. And residents, at the end of the day, they want positive leadership and to address quality of life issues, neighborhood concerns. It's getting those day-to-day nuts and bolts city government issues addressed in a proper way.
Yeah, I mean, money doesn't seem to be the problem, even though they're saying there's a shortage of it, because the money that's coming in, I think it's just not being adequately spent. I think if we were hiring numbers, like I said, in law enforcement, it costs more for overtime than it does for regular. If we're hiring the adequate number of people, we wouldn't have to be paying these exorbitant salaries in some instances because we're running short in other places. We've only got a couple of minutes, Counselor. Is there anything that we didn't touch? Because we've gone over a lot here with the calls that you want to put out. We're going into a new 2025. Anything that you want to?
Yeah, let me just say 2 things. The city budget will be discussed very shortly, the new budget. But we do have to be respectful to the residents of Boston. We can't have a 8% increase in the budget. We do have to cut some services. We do have to cut some programs, and it's politically unpopular to do that. There's one particular issue that I think deserves to be cut, program, and that's participatory budget. I know residents will not like that because it was placed on the ballot and the residents voted for it. But we have to be fiscally disciplined and ensure residents that we take any penny that comes into the city, we spend it appropriately. And we have to readdress and reorganize how we think about the city budget. But then I think there needs to be some cuts to personnel. Maybe we have to have a hiring freeze. Maybe we have to hold the city council pay raise. Maybe we should not accept it for this year, the $5,000. It's not a lot of money, but it will show the residents we're taking these responsibility very seriously.
But also, it shows that you're willing to be in it for the pain that other folks, right? Financial, that other folks are having to tighten their budget, right? Because no one in their home is, most probably people who work are not getting an 8% pay raise next year to offset that 8% tax increase, right? So they got to find it from somewhere, or they have to cut in other ways. So I think government, I respect it what you're saying, that the government should be no different, that sometimes you just can't spend what you don't have.
Larry, the city council got a 20% pay raise increase over a period of 4 or 5 years. It went up $5,000 for 4 or 5 years. That's excessive.
Yeah.
When other people are struggling to pay their bills, I see elderly people look at the grocery store looking at a can of soup, Campbell's soup, and I said to the woman, I said, "What are you looking at the soup for?" And she said, "The price on it, it's 20 cents higher." And I'm saying to myself, That's the everyday struggles residents have in the city.
Yeah, to cut you off, we've got to go, Council. We got to get you back. This has to be a regular segment because when you come, the phone's lit up, but the information you provide is so important. You've been listening to At the Round Table with namely our guest, District 2 City Councilor Ed Flynn. Hopefully, we'll be right. We'll be back next year, next week.
Thank you.
He's got me.
Thank you, sir.
You ain't gotta rock fake jewels or walk around strap. I respect artists getting money, but love them for spitting crack. And the fact that one track can move a family out the trap. It's a dream for us lost souls brought up in the mix. I'm motivated by the artists coming out in my midst. And the artists that paved the way when I didn't exist. Music's a skyscraper, I'm just trying to add a couple bricks.
This is for the dreamers. They say I am a dreamer. Cause I still believe that anything is possible as long as you work hard. Hustle real hard, hustle real hard, hustle real hard, hustle so if I never see ya, never get the chance to meet ya, no, I came up from the bottom, always rooting for the underdog. Hustle real hard, hustle real hard, hustle real hard, hustle.